There are moments in the history of science when a single discovery does not simply add to existing knowledge, but instead pulls at the foundational threads of everything that knowledge was built upon. These are not comfortable moments. They do not arrive with celebration or immediate consensus. They arrive with confusion and resistance, and a particular kind of institutional silence that descends when the data being presented cannot be easily dismissed, but also cannot be comfortably integrated into frameworks that have organized scientific understanding for generations. The moment MIT researchers processed the clearest X-ray imaging ever conducted on the object recovered from Buga, Colombia, was precisely that kind of moment. What the imaging revealed did not fit. It did not fit the timeline of human technological development. It did not fit the known history of materials science or optical engineering or computational architecture. It did not fit anything that the scientific community had agreed upon regarding what was possible in the ancient world. And the implications of what it did fit, the technologies it most closely resembled, were disturbing enough that the researchers who first saw the results reportedly checked their equipment and repeated their processes multiple times before allowing themselves to accept that what they were seeing was real. The object itself arrived in a manner that already defied easy explanation. In early 2025, witnesses in the rural area surrounding Buga, in Colombia, reported observing a metallic sphere descending from the sky in a pattern of movement that no conventional aircraft could reproduce. The trajectory was not the kind associated with falling objects, not the arc of debris, or a predictable path of a meteorite. It moved in ways that suggested some form of control, or at minimum some physical property that distinguished it from anything in the known inventory of human-made flying objects. When it came to rest and the first people approached it, what they encountered was a sphere of remarkable physical perfection, its surface polished to a mirror quality and completely smooth, without any visible seam or joint or manufacturing mark of any kind. Its temperature was anomalously cold relative to its environment, and when water made contact with its surface, the water evaporated instantly rather than beading or running off the way it would on any known metallic surface. The physical properties became stranger the more closely the object was examined. The weight of the sphere was measured on multiple occasions under controlled conditions and produced results that appeared to contradict basic physical principles. The recorded mass change between measurements in ways that no known physical phenomenon could account for. One measurement would register a figure of approximately 2 kilograms. A subsequent measurement under the same conditions would return a figure 5 times larger. This was not instrument error. The instruments were checked and rechecked. The measurements were repeated by different people using different equipment. The results continued to be inconsistent in precisely the same direction and magnitude, as though the sphere was not a passive object subject to fixed physical laws, but something that interacted with its measurement environment in ways that current physics has no language to describe. Scientific institutions that became aware of the object moved quickly to request access for formal analysis. MIT was among those that pressed most urgently for the opportunity to conduct advanced imaging of the sphere's interior, recognizing that whatever was inside the outer shell might provide the most direct evidence about the object's nature and origin. The X-ray technology applied to the sphere represented the most sophisticated imaging capability currently available, designed to penetrate dense materials and produce detailed internal maps that reveal structural complexity at microscopic scales. When the imaging was complete and the results were processed and displayed, what the researchers saw inside that perfectly smooth exterior was a level of internal engineering complexity that the most advanced manufacturing facilities on Earth in the 21st century could not replicate. The internal structure revealed 3 distinct concentric layers of metallic material, each with different physical properties, arranged around a central core with a precision that implied not assembly but formation, as though the entire object had been created as a single unified structure rather than built from components joined together. Distributed throughout this layered structure were 18 smaller spherical objects arranged in a geometric pattern that mathematicians who later analyzed the imaging results identified as following the same mathematical relationships found in quantum crystallography and molecular architecture. These were not randomly positioned. They were placed with an accuracy that required manipulation at scales approaching the atomic, something that the most advanced manufacturing technologies available today can only achieve under highly specific laboratory conditions with equipment that itself represents the cutting edge of human engineering capability. Connecting the central core to each of the 18 internal microspheres was a network of 52 filaments. When the imaging was examined in detail and the physical properties of these filaments were analyzed, the conclusion reached by the researchers was one that produced what witnesses described as genuine shock in a laboratory. The filaments were fiber optic strands, not structures that resembled fiber optic technology in a general way, or that shared some superficial characteristics with modern optical communications infrastructure. Actual fiber optic strands, with optical transmission properties that tested better than the best fiber optic cables currently manufactured for telecommunications applications. The optical loss measurements of the filaments inside this object were lower than any optical fiber that human engineers have managed to produce with the full resources of contemporary materials science and precision manufacturing. An object of unknown origin with an interior engineering system that outperformed the current state-of-the-art in one of the most advanced areas of modern technology. The question of age transformed the situation from extraordinary to genuinely history-altering. Preserved within the microscopic channels that house the fiber optic filaments was an organic resin material that had clearly been placed there deliberately as part of the object's construction, functioning to anchor and protect the delicate optical strands within their channels. This resin was not contamination or incidental material. Its presence was clearly intentional, a designed element of the object's engineering. When radiocarbon dating was applied to the resin samples, the results produced dates that the researchers at both MIT and the University of Georgia, working independently on the same samples, initially refused to accept. The resin dated to approximately 12,500 years before the present. The sphere and the extraordinary technological systems contained within it had been constructed during the Younger Dryas period, more than 7,000 years before the earliest known examples of human metallurgy, more than 9,000 years before the construction of the Egyptian pyramids, at a time when the archaeological record of human civilization describes populations engaged in hunter-gatherer subsistence with no evidence of organized industry, advanced material processing, or technological development of any meaningful complexity. The metals that compose the sphere's three concentric layers presented their own profound challenges to conventional understanding. Spectroscopic analysis identified the primary alloy as containing aluminum combined with cerium, lithium, and neodymium in a fusion that exhibited physical properties exceeding aerospace-grade titanium in hardness and structural integrity. Each of these elements individually represents a significant challenge to the 12,000-year dating of the object. Aluminum was not refined industrially until the 19th century. Cerium was not identified as a distinct element until the early 1800s. Neodymium was isolated around the same period. All three elements, combined in a high-purity alloy with properties that exceed the performance of modern aerospace materials, fused together in an object that predates the entirety of recorded human history by several thousand years. The metallurgical impossibility of this combination at that date cannot be resolved by any theory that keeps the sphere within the boundaries of known human technological development. The behavior of the middle metallic layer added another dimension that moved the sphere's properties beyond anything currently achievable. When researchers deliberately introduced surface damage to samples taken from this layer for testing purposes, they observed something that has no parallel in material science. The damage repaired itself. Within a period of approximately 48 hours, the damaged areas returned to their original state without any external intervention or treatment. Self-healing material properties are an active area of research in contemporary material science, with various experimental systems having demonstrated limited capacity for this behavior under specific controlled conditions. None of them come close to the speed, completeness, or autonomous nature of the regeneration observed in the sphere's middle layer. The material appeared to actively resist damage and restore itself in a manner that suggested not a passive chemical process, but something more closely resembling a design maintenance system operating at the material level. The central core at the heart of the sphere's internal structure presented what may be the most conceptually challenging finding of the entire investigation. When the imaging of this core was analyzed by MIT's materials scientists in the context of the Institute's own recent theoretical research, they identified a structural correspondence that produced what was described as a deeply unsettling recognition. The internal geometry of the core matched the quantum dot storage patterns that MIT researchers had themselves only modeled theoretically in 2024. Quantum dots are nanoscale semiconductor structures with extraordinary data storage capacity and quantum computational properties that represent one of the most advanced frontiers of current computing research. The central core of an object 12,500 years old displayed an internal architecture that corresponded to theoretical models of quantum information storage that human scientists had only conceptualized in the previous year. The sphere was not simply old. It was, in the domain of information architecture, ahead of where human science currently stands. The behavior of the internal fiber optic network under observation added a further layer of disturbing implication. When the sphere was exposed to specific wavelengths of light during testing, the filaments did not simply transmit that light passively. They activated in coordinated sequences that moved through the network in patterns that MIT's neural network specialists brought in to analyze the activation data, described with considerable discomfort as resembling cognitive processing. The signals did not flow in one direction or follow simple transmission paths. They moved dynamically, with the patterns of activation responding to external inputs in ways that implied not just function, but something approaching responsiveness. The 18 microspheres appear to operate as nodes in a distributed processing network, with information moving between them in patterns that bore closer resemblance to the activity of a neural network responding to stimuli than any known mechanical or electronic device. Specialists who reviewed the activation data said privately that what they were looking at resembled the behavior of a thinking system more than any machine architecture they had previously encountered. The surface of the sphere contributed another layer of impossible sophistication to the overall picture. The symbols and markings that covered the exterior surface appeared at first to be decorative or perhaps representational in the way that marks on ancient artifacts typically are. Microscopic analysis produced a very different assessment. The engravings were executed at a precision that required either laser or nanofabrication technology to produce, with line widths thinner than a human hair maintained with absolute consistency across the entire surface. No tool available to any human civilization at any point in documented history prior to the late 20th century could have produced markings of this precision. The symbols themselves resisted classification into any known writing system, though linguists noted structural resemblances to fragments of several ancient scripts, including early cuneiform forms and runic markings, none of which came into existence until thousands of years after the sphere was constructed. The resemblance raised the extraordinary possibility that human writing systems may have been influenced by exposure to the sphere or objects like it rather than the reverse. Mathematicians brought in to analyze the symbol patterns found something that complicated the interpretation further. The arrangements of markings on the surface appear to encode mathematical relationships, including the golden ratio and harmonic proportional structures found in natural systems from atomic arrangements to biological forms. The symbols did not appear to simply represent language in any conventional sense. Their patterns corresponded to mathematical and physical relationships in ways that suggested they might function as a kind of interface, a set of operational instructions or activation triggers designed to interact with the sphere's internal systems through electromagnetic or resonance mechanisms rather than to communicate information to a reader in the way that written language communicates. The boundary between symbol and machine component appeared to dissolve under this analysis, leaving researchers with the unsettling suggestion that the marks on the sphere's surface were not decoration or writing, but functional elements of its operational design. The activation events that began occurring in 2025 transformed the investigation from a study of an ancient artifact into something considerably more urgent. Scientists monitoring the sphere detected the emergence of rhythmic electromagnetic pulses emanating from the object, pulses that follow precise intervals and maintain consistent patterns rather than varying randomly the way natural electromagnetic phenomena typically do. The signals had the character of intentional transmission rather than passive emission. They resembled, in their regularity and structured patterning, the kind of signal that an engineered communication system produces when it is operating as designed. The sphere was no longer dormant. After more than 12,000 years of silence, it had begun doing something, and what it was doing looked disturbingly like broadcasting. The situation became more complex when seismic monitoring equipment detected harmonic signatures approximately 600 meters from the sphere's location that corresponded in their frequency and pattern to the pulses the sphere itself was producing. Analysis ruled out natural explanations, including geological activity, atmospheric interference, and equipment malfunction. The correspondence was too precise and too consistent to be coincidental. The implication that the data pointed toward was that the sphere was not a solitary object, but part of a network, that somewhere beneath the surface near Buga, there was a receiver or another component of the same system responding to the sphere's activation signals in kind. The possibility that a distributed network of objects with the sphere's technological properties might be distributed across or beneath the Earth's surface, operating a communication or monitoring system that has been running continuously for 12.5 millennia, was one that researchers found difficult to discuss without considerable caution about the implications. The temporal context of the sphere's construction provides the darkest dimension of the entire investigation. 12,500 years ago, the Earth was undergoing one of the most catastrophic episodes in its recent geological history. The Younger Dryas period was characterized by a sudden and severe climate collapse that drove global temperatures downward in a geological instant, extinguished entire species of large mammals, and appears to have overwhelmed or eliminated multiple human cultures that have been developing across different continents. The evidence for a cosmic impact event during this period, found in geological layers across multiple continents in the form of impact markers and spherical microparticles consistent with high-temperature atmospheric events, suggests that whatever triggered the Younger Dryas may have been as sudden and violent as the evidence implies. The sphere was built during this catastrophe, or immediately before it. Whoever created it did so while their world was ending or while they could see it was about to end. This context transforms the question of the sphere's purpose from an abstract puzzle into something with immediate emotional weight. The creation of an object of this technological sophistication, with self-healing materials, quantum information architecture, fiber optic communications infrastructure, and a design built to endure indefinitely during a period of global catastrophe, implies a specific and urgent motivation. The sphere was built to last through whatever was coming. It was built to preserve something or to monitor something or to warn something across whatever length of time it would take for a civilization capable of understanding it to come into existence. The fact that it began actively broadcasting in 2025, at a moment when the Earth's magnetic field is measurably weakening and geological instability is increasing globally, introduces a possibility that researchers have been reluctant to state directly, but that the data forces into consideration. The sphere may be a warning system. It may have been built to activate when the conditions that destroyed the civilization that created it began to appear again. And it may have activated because those conditions are appearing again now. What MIT's imaging revealed in the clearest X-ray ever taken of the Buga Sphere is not a single shocking finding, but an accumulation of impossible details that collectively demand revision of what humanity believes about its own history and about the nature of technological development on this planet. The sphere existed before recorded history and contains technology that exceeds current human capability. It was built from materials that should not have been available to any civilization at the time of its construction. It houses an internal architecture that corresponds to quantum computing concepts only theorized in the last year of human scientific research. It has been operational in some meaningful sense for over 12,000 years and is currently becoming more active, and it appears to be part of a larger system whose full extent and purpose remain unknown. The questions it raises are not comfortable questions. They do not have answers that fit neatly within the existing framework of human scientific understanding. But they are the questions that the data demands, and the data does not care about comfort. The sphere has been waiting 12,000 years for someone capable of asking the right questions. The X-ray imaging suggests we may finally have arrived at that moment. Whether or not we are prepared for what the answers might reveal